Okay, that's a nice introduction. Welcome everyone to the first session today. I'm Mats Ljungqvist, working in the European Commission with Space Research and Innovation, and I will be moderating or chairing the session today, and will be giving you presentations focusing mainly on the Horizon 2020 program still, and on the next call for proposal, which is the last call for proposal in Horizon 2020. So this will be run basically like an information event with a little bit of extra information here and there. And maybe I can ask, so let's see now, can we ask for the slide presentation to start? Okay, very good. So as I said, we will talk about Horizon 2020. We include as well a specific element on Galileo, which is not formally under Horizon 2020, but under the Galileo program, but still address research, the fundamental elements. And we'll finish with the day with an outlook on the future, Horizon Europe and the space program and other related activities, which will start them from 2021 onwards. Okay, so the day looks like this. Now, I'm a bit in trouble because I don't see. So we'll start with a session dealing with Copernicus and Galileo, what we call downstream services, and also service evolution for Copernicus. You know, Galileo is the satellite navigation program, and Copernicus, Earth observation. You have plenty of information outside this room in the information stands. So that will take us to a short session on entrepreneurship, where we'll talk a bit about, I'll give you some information about the Horizon Prize, an incentive prize for space launch vehicle, and Innofin Space Equity Pilot. Then we have a coffee break, and come back for another session on Horizon 2020, space technology this time, in-orbit demonstration validation, and the upstream research for Galileo, EGNOS. And then we will proceed with a more concrete activity or concrete sub-session here on success stories. We will present two projects, EO Mores and Strike 3 from project managers. Thank you very much. Great. From project managers of these projects, who will tell us their experiences participating in the program, and primarily focusing, of course, on the achievements of their projects. And then finally, hopefully, we have some time left at the end on a view towards the future, space in Horizon Europe. As I mentioned, Horizon Europe comes up as a program. Hopefully, the Commission has proposed a program for 100 billion euro. The member states, of course, now are discussing the overall budget for the 7-year period starting in 2021. So we still do not know the budget envelope for the EU budget, and therefore we don't know the final budget envelope for the research program. There's also a space program covering operational activities in Copernicus and Galileo, and we have some additional programs for space entrepreneurship called InvestEU. So this will all be a bit explained. It's quite a tight session in terms of information and in terms of timing. So we'll try to be effective, but still, of course, we very much welcome questions. We have microphones here. I think there will be microphones distributed to the person who wants to ask questions, because that would liven up the discussion and the day a bit. And we're here to answer your questions, either during the session or or during the breaks. So, without further ado, okay, we'll move into a short overview. We base in the Commission. So first of all, the Commission, we are now in DG GROW, so it's a Director General for Growth, Entrepreneurship. We also do space there. Space research, space policy, Copernicus, Galileo, and also defense research and other things as well, which have to do more with industrial policy in general. So space strategy was published a few years ago, which talks about 4 main goals: maximizing benefits of space for society and economy, fostering a competitive European space sector, reinforcing autonomy in accessing and using space and in a safe way, and strengthening Europe's role as a global player in space. We have, in the current MFF, in the current multi-annual financial framework, we have Copernicus, Galileo, EGNOS, called usually EGNOS, and the Horizon 2020 space part. All in all, it's about 12 billion euro funding, of which research is a smaller part, but important, of course, for supporting the programs and for supporting future programs. So Horizon 2020 sounds a bit outdated now. Everybody talks about Horizon Europe and the coming program and budget and calls, but we shouldn't forget Horizon 2020 is in its final year. Next year we'll have a final call for proposals. There will probably be a work program update with another call focusing on climate in the second half of next year. We are, as these programs go, the first projects start about a year after the program has started, and they last about 2, 3, 4 years after the end of the last call. So we are, in terms of project duration, we are in the middle of Horizon 2020 actually. Last projects will finish by 2023, 2024. Yeah. Okay, in Horizon 2020 we have 3 priority areas. You're probably familiar already with that, some of you. There is an excellent science pillar where the more basic research, more curiosity-driven activities are found, including, of course, the mobility grants, Marie Curie, and European Research Council. Primarily, these are not driven by subjects and topics, but more bottom-up. Excellent research is funded, whatever area. So there are some space, astronomy, cosmology projects in here as well. And then the priority 2, space, so industrial leadership. Here we find space, together with information technology, nanotechnology, biotech, also manufacturing and access to risk finance for entrepreneurship and so on. So all about supporting and strengthening European industry by funding research and development, research and innovation. Priority 3, societal challenges, focus on a number of important global challenges, such as health, food security, energy, transport, climate, etc. And also here you will find space applications, of course in climate, obviously, Earth observation plays an important role, mobility, satellite navigation plays an important role, and so on, and sometimes combinations of space technologies and satellite communication as well will be found here and sometimes funded here. The overall budget of Horizon 2020, we talk about 80 billion, slightly reduced though, and the space part is about 1.5 billion euro over the 7 years. Okay, so that concludes my short introduction, and just wanted to say there is a lot of information that you need. Today we will focus more on the content of the course, what is going to be done, what is going to be funded, and also examples then of projects actually funded. We will not talk about how you write a proposal and how proposals are evaluated and so on. There is information on that, and you find all the information on what we call Funding and Tenders portal. And you see the link there, but you just have to Google EU funding and tenders. You find it, and there you have all the information about all the programs actually, including Horizon 2020, and all the background information, all the work programs and guidance document and evaluation, let's say, definition or explanation of how proposals are evaluated. So all this is very important for prospective proposers then to dive into. So we will not be able to touch about all these things today, obviously. Okay, that concludes my introduction. I will now pass the floor to Cristina Ananasso, my colleague from Copernicus, who will be able to give us an explanation about the upcoming call and the topics for Copernicus, downstream and service evolution. Push there.
Okay.
Back, front.
Thank you. Okay. Hello, good morning. My name is Cristina Ananasso. I am from DG GROW and I work in the Copernicus unit. Okay, before entering in the details of the topics related to Copernicus, I would like to give you an overview just to put the topic in the right context. So what is Copernicus? Everybody probably know. Is one of the flagship program of the European Union, and his main goal is to monitor the Earth, its environment, and the different ecosystems, and also to prepare for crises related to security, but also to natural emergency. Copernicus is a user-driven program, and the user have for Copernicus really the core of all the activities also related to research. And Copernicus has the goal also to drive economy development and digital economy. The system. Copernicus is not only a satellite program, so the core of the program are the services. We have 6 services working operationally since 4 or 5 years, depending on the service itself, that using satellite data coming from both the Sentinels, the Copernicus Sentinel, but also from a third-party mission, together with the in-situ data and together with the models, can give you value-added products and information. So not only data, but also information related to the state of our planet. The governance of the program. The European Commission is the project manager, and the European Union has delegated to different entrusted entities part of the design at the beginning, but also development and operation of the system. So we have space, that is the space component that is delegated to ESA, the European Space Agency, and to EUMETSA. Then we have the services that were and now they are delegated to our entrusted entities. And then we have the in-situ component. The in-situ component are related to the in-situ part of the program that generally is a in-kind contribution from member states, but we have the European Environment Agency that is doing a coordinated action to collect, to find the gaps, and to coordinate all the activities that are cross-cutting activities between the different services and the space component related to in-situ data. So these are our services. You probably know them. The Copernicus Marine Environmental Monitoring Service, the Land Monitoring Service, Atmosphere Monitoring Service, and the 3 services that are more cross-cutting, that are the Emergency Management Service, the Security, and the Climate Change. These are the space component. We have already 7 Sentinel flying, more will come in the future, and all of them have different domain of application. All of these data are publicly available, and they are full and free and open data policy. In the last year, the Commission started to work on the Copernicus evolution based on these three different policy contexts. You have already seen from Matt's presentation the space strategy for Europe, where the continuity is one of the main goal, and also the evolution is mentioned. Then in 2019, we had a European Union Space Program regulation that is going to be finalized in the next few weeks, where also here there is a strong indication for the continuity of the investment in the existing services and on the evolution to match new requirements and to match new needs. And then the last one in this list is the European Green Deal at the end of 2019, where for sure Copernicus can play and will play an important role. But what does it mean evolution, not revolution, for Copernicus? This is the evolution of the services, and there is the evolution of the space component that should respond to the need of the services. And this is based on some well-identified user needs and requirements that we have collected and analyzed in the last years, and also it's based on new emerging policies. From the user, the first request that we have received is the continuity. They want to be reassured that the program will continue at least as it is now. And then there have been identified some three new areas, not really new, but that should be better exploited, that are the anthropogenic CO2 emission and, in general, greenhouse gas emission, changes in the Arctic, and land use and forestry. So based on these, together with the European Space Agency, the Commission has identified 6 possible satellite missions. All of them are in this list. The most important, or at least the first in this priority list, is the anthropogenic CO2 monitoring mission. And then we have to also take into account that there will be new sentinels, a continuation of the existing ones. All of these have a big question mark because we still don't know the funds that will be made available for this decision. And the same for the service evolution. We have worked a lot with our entrusted entities that they are in charge of the operation of the existing services, and they are for us our main not stakeholder, but sure the entities that can help support us in defining the evolution of the services themselves. And here are reported the main requests or the main needs that we have received from them. Also in this case, there is a question mark that probably will be solved in the next few months. We have already seen these slides from Matt's. So now I'm going to talk about the space part related to Earth observation. And in 2020, we are going to have 3 topics in the Copernicus evolution, and other 2 topics more related to market uptake and big data technologies. So the first one is Copernicus evolution, research activity in support of the evolution of the Copernicus services. In this case, it's important to identify some emerging user requirements related also to European Union policy. And it's important the integration of space research with other non-space domain. The scope of the proposal should be to identify one at least or more core products to be developed take into account the existing portfolio already inside the services and define clearly which kind of new model or improved model, which kind of new algorithm or technique should be improved to generate a new or a better product. It's important to demonstrate in the proposal the operational feasibility of the proposed products and to complement it with a proof of concept or a prototype that can be easily fit in the already existing service. This project has an indicative budget of 10 million with a recommended project size from 1 to 3 million. This is a research and innovation action. And the presence and the participation of SME is really encouraged. We have already identified in the topic the area or the domains inside each of the service where we already find a need. So there are some suggestions coming from the Commission on which product you can work on. The second topic is still on the Copernicus evolution and is a new concept of an innovative and holistic solution for Sentinel-Calval. The Copernicus program recognizes the importance of the Calval activities related to the Sentinels. It's important to understand that all the in situ Calval data and measurement are part of the in-kind contribution from member states, but it's strongly based on research infrastructure. And it's quite different to work in a research domain for an operational program. So the idea is to better understand what is the situation at the European level of this research infrastructure, which are the gaps, and how they can be modified or enhanced to become more operational, because Copernicus is really an operational program. So in this case, the type of action is a coordination and support action. So it's very important to create a network, a European network, that is not only focused on Europe, because Calval activities should be done at a global level, but this coordinated action should support the European Commission to define a roadmap toward a better structured Calval activities related to the Sentinel. The recommended project size is 3 million, so we expected to fund only one big project. And it's important to take into account what is already existing and not create something from the scratch. Last topic on the Copernicus evolution is emission exploitation concept for water. In this case, the specific challenge is to analyze, to collect, and to really understand which can be the support that Copernicus can give to a better understanding of the global water cycle, in particular in the inland waters. The scope is to analyze current and plan Earth observation space capacity together with innovative processing, modeling, and computing technique to reinforce the existing portfolio and to create something that is cross-cutting between the different services that maybe have already some products related to water, but can be better exploited with this thematic approach related to water. Also in this case, the type of action is a coordination and support action Also in this case, we ask to create a European network that support the Commission in defining the next step toward this water domain. And the indicative budget is 3 million. Last two topics. One is in the Copernicus market uptake. This is a recurrent topic. We have this topic in all the 3 years of the last work program. And the other one is big data technologies and artificial intelligence for Copernicus. So also in this case, I would like to put it in the right context. We started to work we realized the importance of the new IT technology, the big data, the cloud, the artificial intelligence can be and should be part of Copernicus. And also in this case, I only highlight 2 main communications from the Commission related to artificial intelligence for Europe that was published in 2018, and the coordinated plan on artificial intelligence in the same year. Here reported only some figures related to Copernicus and why Copernicus is really a big data program, not only for the volume of the data, but also for the different kind of data that you have to deal with. Some years ago, the Commission started in this domain, proposing this data access and information platform, the DIAS, that you probably already know, and yesterday there were a session dedicated to them. We have 5 DIAS that are operational, and that should support the community to have an easy access to the data and to work with the data without the issue of downloading a big amount of data. This topic is the Copernicus market uptake. As I told you, is a recurrent topic, and the idea is to work, and the specific challenge is really related to work and to process enormous amount of data and information from both the space component and the services. It's important to integrate this data with data coming from different domains, and in particular we highlight in this topic the synergies with Galileo. And this is an innovation action, so the technology should be at the state of the art to produce and to offer user-friendly solution. In this case, the Commission suggests the use of the existing European data infrastructure, DIAS, for example, and it's important to clearly identify inside the proposal the different role of industry and the different role of the end user that should be there since the beginning. It's a requested business plan for this proposal, and as I told you, it's an innovation action, and the indicative budget is 9 million, with a recommended project size from 1 to 3 million. Last topic, big data technology and artificial intelligence for Copernicus. And for Copernicus is really in the title because, yes, it's important, the tool, but the final scope, the final goal is always Copernicus. In this case, we have a research and innovation action. So the idea is to really develop something new, something that can respond to new challenges related to the processing and the distribution of Copernicus data. Also in this case, we highlight the use of existing European data infrastructure like DIAS and the synergies with Galileo, and the importance, as usual, of the involvement of the user. The indicative budget in this case is 10 million, and we have a recommended project size from 2 to 4 millions. I can skip this one. This is my last slide, and I want only to highlight 3 topics in the societal challenges 5 that can be of interest for you in the Earth domain, because it's not really space related, but you can use space data to better draft your proposal. There is this first topic toward a comprehensive European mountain research strategy. They have a slight different deadline, and please go on the website of this proposal to have more detail. The second one is integrated GEOS climate application to support adaptation and mitigation measure of the Paris Agreement. And the last one is supporting the implementation of GEOS in the Arctic in collaboration with Copernicus. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina. And do we have any questions at this stage for her, for Christina? No questions. We can have a chance also after the next presentation. So my next question is, do we have Marta Krivanis here from GSA? Or someone from GSA? Yes, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Very good.
Good morning. Obviously, you don't see Marta Krivanis. My name is Reinhard Blasi from the GSA, same department, market development. And in this session, I will shed some light on how does it look for EGNOS and Galileo. I first wanted to put a bit of a context. We are running right now a CBA in order to update basically what we knew in the past and compare the costs of the Galileo program. And if I say Galileo, I mean EGNOS, EGNOS and Galileo, and compare it with the benefits. And here you see that by 2027, we see 60 billion cumulative benefits. If you, of course, it doesn't come without the costs. If you compare it with the costs, you see that on the bottom, it still holds true. So it is a worthwhile investment, and part of it is, of course, R&D. It's an important component of making this investment pay. On the right-hand side, maybe you cannot even see it. We look into where do these benefits come from. And you will see that most of it is basically products and services in the downstream sector. You can see the blue and the orange color. It's about 3/4 are related to downstream. Of course, there are upstream benefits as well. However, the main ones are downstream, and this means basically business and jobs for the European Union. Looking at it more in detail, you see that it's a market that is growing constantly. You see that on the right-hand side. There was just a new market report published last week or the week before last week, and it's downloadable for free. It has become a reference, and it's much more than just a market report. That sounds quite boring. It's quite a good snapshot into the GNSS market, how Europe positions itself, and what are the big trends, and so on and so forth. So I really recommend to read it. It's well more interesting than you might expect. However, if we look into where the European investment goes, you see that on the left bottom side, we see that 8 billion go into the EGNSS infrastructure, which is essential. However, 300 million go into development of value-added applications. That's the R&D part that I will talk about. Just to remind you, the biggest part of the benefits come from downstream. However, the gros of the investments goes to upstream, and despite that, we reap benefits in that area. If you look into which are the markets in terms of size, the biggest markets are LBS, that's what you are carrying in your pockets, mobile phones and mobile consumer applications, and road almost 90%, which is normal. These are the big mass markets. The professional ones, you see that on the right-hand side, there you have the more strategic ones, and strategic also for the European Union, from agriculture to surveying, but also applications like aviation, like the safety critical transport, and timing and synchronization. And this is especially important for the critical infrastructure. So it's not only the size, but it's mostly and also the strategic importance of the European Union. How does Europe stand? How does Europe compete in comparison with other geographic areas? You see that we are today at 25% of the global market revenues that are generated by European companies. If you put that into, if you compare this with other high-tech branches, you see that we are lagging behind. Typical in the high-tech sector, EU has a share of 33%. Therefore, we want to close this gap, and we want to reach at least 30% by 2025. And this is why we are investing in R&D. R&D or R&I, research and innovation, and we always think about the markets behind that. That's just a slide to put even the R&D into perspective. Our R&D or R&I activities are not isolated. They are part of a more encompassing strategy. And this is split into 3 pillars. The first pillar is you need to know the markets. I was mentioning the market report before. This is on the left-hand side. We need to know the markets, and we need to know the mechanisms and the industry mechanics, if you like. And there is no such thing than a European or that a global GNSS markets. These are very distinct markets. You see that on the left-hand side, what we're talking about. And each of these markets has distinct value chain. And so it's necessary in order to have the impact to understand these markets and then know how to act on that markets. When it comes to acting on these markets, you see that in the middle column that we call demand support. So this is basically where we get on the ground and interact with the stakeholders and players and cooperate. So just to give you an example, receiver industry is of paramount importance in order to carry Galileo benefits on the markets, obviously. So we are since many years in contact with the different manufacturers and make sure that Galileo functionality is integrated. But we do much more. We do technical support for the industry. We do testing campaigns to demonstrate the different benefits. We just finalized 2 testing campaigns on consumer goods and GIS devices, that is geolocation devices. And we will carry on another one for agriculture, and we basically cover all the markets. So this is where we get on the ground, get our fingers dirty, and do what is the core of market development. However, we also need to have a competitive offer, what we call offer creation, and this is basically where we position our R&D or R&I activities. And we will see that in the next slides. There are 2 legs of it. One is H2020, and the other one is what we call fundamental elements. And we will see how this works a bit more in detail. In brief, H2020, this is application and services fundamental element. It's more the hardware. It's the receiver, chipsets, and devices where we want to foster the European GNSS components and make sure that the distinctive features of EGNOS and Galileo go all the way down to the user. You see this described a bit here. Fundamental elements, as just mentioned, focused on chipset, receivers, devices, so this is the hardware. And Horizon 2020, this is really the innovative application, the services that we need in order to reap the benefits that I mentioned in the beginning. It's not all, we do much more. You see that on the right-hand side, we have Galileo Masters, as you will know, and tonight you have a celebration on that one. And we also are active in entrepreneurship. We just finalized our first My Galileo app challenge that basically gathered application developers, mobile phone application developers that come not from the space environment. And we had 3 winners just announced, and this is quite refreshing to have these new spirits in the non-traditional space, entrepreneurs and young professionals that really got excited of playing with what you can do with Galileo. Now getting to the core, this was the context which is important to understand because we cannot see our R&D activities isolated. It only will have impact if it's well integrated in an overall encompassing approach. Focusing now on first Horizon 2020, we have since about a month the last call open, and you have time until 5th of March to submit your ideas. So it's the right time right now. There are 4 topics. We have 3 innovation actions that are funded by 70%. If you are not-for-profit organization, you get 100% funded. And in this innovation action, we have 3 topics. The first one, it's EGNSS applications, fostering green, safe, and smart mobility. I will put all these 3 topics in simple words. The first topic, it's about smart and innovative transport. The second one, EGNSS applications, fostering digitization. Sounds a bit cryptic. What is behind? This is everything that is mass market, location-based services, consumer devices, things you carry from mobile phones to handheld devices, Internet of Things, and so on. The third one, EGNSS applications fostering societal resilience and protecting the environment. That also sounds a bit cryptic. I translated for you. These are all the professional applications that are non-consumer goods. This is agriculture, it's geomatics, surveying, timing and synchronization, and so on. We will see that in a minute. We have a new one, PCP, public procurement, which is basically encouraging the public entities to use European GNSS and not do research, but use this instrument as a public procurement instrument. We will see that in a minute. You see the different budgets, which amount to 21 million euros. I will keep this short because you can read all of this online. However, I want to give you some messages. This is the first one, green, safe, smart mobility. As you see, this is everything that is transport related, be it in the air, on the ground, on the sea. And if you go through the different topics, you will notice that it's quite broad topics. It's important to understand that these words and topics are not exhaustive, so we are quite flexible. What is important is that you focus on transport and that you take advantage of what comes from EGNOS and Galileo. Second topic, applications fostering digitization. Again, this is everything that is consumer-based products, applications, services. You see some examples here. It's a broad topic. Take it as a container where you can put everything that is related to IoT, cloud computing, big data, but also small robotics, mobile phones, of course, and see it in that context, please. The third one, fostering societal resilience and protecting the environment. This is probably the most cryptic ones. Again, please stay open and focus or understand this as the topic for everything that is professional applications. And professional applications include also emergency and disaster management and search and rescue. On top of that, everything that is high precision, surveying, mapping, we call it geomatics, everything that is focused on centimeter, decentimeter level, agriculture, precision agriculture and beyond. It's not only moving machinery, I see it also in a bigger context, including the Common Agricultural Policy, and timing and synchronization, which is extremely important for the critical European infrastructure and not always so closely linked to satellite navigation, but it's an important topic. All of these projects, also the ones before, I did not mention it, go from 1 to 3 million euros. Also there, we are not prescriptive. If you can justify why to go below or above, this does not disqualify you. In all of these topics, please focus on the differentiators of Galileo and EGNOS. Take advantage of what European GNSS can do compared to other constellations from authentication functions to high accuracy functions, the dual frequency where Galileo is leading, and so on and so forth. Take advantage and show how you bring benefits to the users. Very shortly, the new one, what I mentioned, the pre-commercial procurement. It's the first time that we are using this instrument, and we did launch a study in order to understand where this can reap the most benefits. You see that on the left-hand side. I will not read it to you, but these are inspirations. It's again not an exhaustive list, but think about concepts like mobility as a service, helicopter emergency landing, support for port operations, public rescue services. So you see that what to consider, think about the public sector as a client buying solutions based on GNSS and thus bringing benefits to the citizens. In a nutshell, you can read the details online, and please do not interpret these topics as exhaustive. If you have a good approach, we are happy to learn it. I mentioned before we have two legs. The one leg we have now seen, this is application services. The other leg, it's based on hardware. In order to make these services happen, you need to have the hardware in place that also take advantage of the EGNSS features. It has, very shortly, 3 objectives. Of course, we want to have innovative services and take advantage of the differentiators. I mentioned them just before. We talked about the EU position in the competitive landscape. So we want to foster and increase and optimize the EU position and increase its market share. And then, of course, we want to foster adoption in the priority segments. Typically, we are talking about grants. We have some procurements as well under fundamental elements. This might be a bit small to read, the message being in red above. You see the calls that are right now open, and some of them will close pretty soon. If you are involved, then of course you know about it. I just give you an example. We look for an enhanced GNSS user terminal. We also have seen that towards the end of the program, we might not have touched all of the topics. That's why we have a kind of an open call. They're filling the gaps. Interference, it's an important and increasingly important topic. Therefore, we have a development of an advanced interference solution. Call for experts. If you are interested in getting engaged as an expert, the project reviewer is open. And drones, UAVs are important, and therefore we also look for drone-borne double frequency receiver. There's more in the pipeline to be published still in December this month. We look for a train receiver, high precision in mass market one, bringing centimeter accuracy to handheld devices, including mobile phones, a shipborne double frequency multi-constellation receiver project, and another one that will be announced shortly and also published in December or January. You see the corresponding budgets on the right-hand side. Wrapping up, as we get towards the end of Horizon 2020 and also to the end of fundamental elements, what do we still have to do? Where do we see that? And it's a bit difficult to put it in one slide, but this is where we see the priorities. We need to complete the uptake of EGNOS and Galileo, especially in the markets that have a longer lead time, the more regulated markets. For example, rail. In rail, the innovation cycles are longer, and so we need to continue in these ones. We know that Galileo is a reality and the differentiators are materializing. We talk about an authentication function, testing service available next year or the year after, having a high accuracy service in the first phase available, dual frequency already a reality. So these differentiators, they now, as they emerge, they need to be ready also from the market side. So we need to prepare the market to take advantage of these differentiators. Then, of course, we need to support the EU downstream industry, and this especially includes SMEs, startups, and look into how can we make these companies, these startups, more compatible and support them. And I think there we have something. We always have a focus on SMEs, but I think we can do much more, especially in that regard. And we need to talk about new tools, innovative procurements. I mentioned it. This is the PCP that we now launch for the first time. We hope that this will be or become an established instrument. Centers of Excellence, it's an important concept, and it is bringing also Europe closer to the regions. And I think this is an area where we can have a big impact. Entrepreneurship, well, what are entrepreneurs looking for? Funding, and there we might need to look into new tools and see how we can support these. And when we talk about financing, venture capital is a topic. This was it in a nutshell, so I conclude here, and if you have questions, please don't hesitate.
Thank you, Reinhard. That's very good. I think we gave a good, concrete, concise summary of where we stand with the Galileo in Horizon 2020 fundamental elements. So, any questions now? Don't be shy. It's not maybe a room which invites like a close interaction, but I think there are microphones available. So please, if you have any questions, take your chance now to ask. Don't see any. Yeah, up here in the front. Please.
Hi, I'm Florian Pon from Safe Cluster. Related to what you present, I particularly notice your market shares. And then I move to your future calls with 10 millions, 4 million, 4 millions, which are not at all accorded with the market shares. So you put 10 million on mobility, not on road, which is 50% of the market. You put 4 million on digitization, and you made some agreements with the LBS, which is 43% of the market. And I wonder if you are working together and close with the other guys from the European Commission, which are financing for user platforms. Because smart mobility from road, it's a good thing, but when you consider the rail going for 0.1%, aviation 0.7%, integrating smart mobility is good, but it will not gonna happen without this again. And this is not us. This is Google, this is Facebook, this is Uber, and so on. So if we are not taking together part on the effort of shaping platforms, and with only 4 million from Galileo for digitization, it's peanuts, we will still miss the market. That's a comment and a question. How to work together with the guys which are set to pay for development of platforms.
Thank you. It's a good question, and let me try to give you a short answer. First of all, with 21 million alone, we cannot change the world. And of course, we would be happy to have more funds available. But this I mentioned because I stressed in the beginning, it's not that you invest these 21 million into research project and magically the European market share will change. First of all, this needs to be in an integrated approach. Therefore, we see R&D, R&I only as an instrument for our market uptake and market development activities. Then when it comes to the market share, and maybe to make it clear, so now we want to move from 25% of the EU companies to 30. Actually, we would like to get to the 33, which is the standard in high-tech industries. The market sizes that you mentioned, it is true that road and LBS, these are the biggest market sizes. We talk about around 90%. This is not the market share. 90% in terms of overall global GNSS market. Therefore, we need to invest in these mass markets, road, transport, I just mentioned autonomous driving, consumer platforms. We don't call it LBS, location-based services anymore, because it's much more, as you rightly say. So this is an integrated approach and often only the tip of an iceberg. In these two markets, just to mention autonomous driving, billions and billions of euros the industry is investing. IoT, well, these two topics are a universe per se, and they are very integrated. And of course, we need to think across the boundaries of the traditional markets, because things get integrated. What yesterday was a highly specialized surveyor that you could see in the city, these skills, technologies now move into your pocket even, and we talk about high accuracy mass market devices. Everything is connected. Everything is connected, and so we need also to think across boundaries in terms of, you mentioned the other DGs. It's quite a challenge sometimes to see exactly what is happening in the different DGs and how you can make this connected. We are doing a big effort, and I'm sure we can do even more so.
Thank you very much. Do I hear? Okay, thank you very much, Reinhard, for that answer, and thank you for the question. It was quite a good question in the sense also it exposed, it pointed to the main issues. Yeah. There's more to be discussed, I suppose. When it comes to discussion with other DGs and so on, I mean, we work, of course, very closely with GSA. It's our agency for space programs. And we will, in the future, I think, work even closer with some other DGs, notably DG Connect, because we will have, if things turn out, well, now we have a new commission in place, a commissioner I mean, our commissioner will be managing basically DG Grow and DG Connect, and the new DG on defense industries and space, where we will be located. And so we have even more, and then in Horizon 20 Europe, we will be in the same cluster of activities with Connect. So I think we will have a lot of opportunities to work together on all these challenging and interesting areas in a more integrated way, really. Right, I have one question actually for you, but maybe I have the answer. You mentioned the 58 running projects, so it could be interesting to know that these projects, information about these projects is actually available easily online and in the various publications of GSA.
Yes, indeed, we even have we talked about consumer platforms, mobile phones. We even have an application, mobile phone application, where you can browse through our project portfolio. And it's quite important for us to not forget what is in this portfolio. First of all, for obvious reasons, to not reinvent the wheel. So we need to take stock of the results of the calls that are in the past. It's also for you guys, if you're interested in submitting a call, to give you some guidance, some examples of what works, and also avoiding for you to reinvent the wheel, and see where are gaps, and also see where today maybe things that were not possible in the past now are possible, and taking the new trends. So it's important that we take this wealth of innovation and also put it on our radar. Ultimately, and this is when we are the most happy, if we look back to a project and we see a successful company and product in the market. This is the best possible outcome. However, this is also public funded, so everyone should take stock, and I invite you to do so on our website and also via our mobile phone application.
Very good. Thank you very much. And as an example, then, in the later, slightly towards the end of this session, we will have a presentation from one of your projects, Strike 3, if I remember well. So stay tuned for that. Thank you very much, Reinhard. So then I think we move, we have one short presentation before the coffee break. So I ask the colleagues up there to put presentation number 4 on. Great. Okay, so in the previous presentation we mentioned a little bit about entrepreneurship and risk capital and venture capital and so on. So I will give a short overview of some of the activities that we fund in this area of business and support to business. So we have the part of the work program here called Space Biz, support to space hubs, outreach education. We have a prize, we have a equity pilot, SME instrument, fast track to innovation. So I will not mention all of these because some of them are not active for the moment, but we'll talk about the space hubs call, about the prize, and about Innofin Space Equity Pilot. So for the space hubs call, let's see here. So yeah, it's one more project or several more projects in the line of activities that we've had since a few years now to support initiatives for startups, scale-ups, entrepreneurs in the downstream and upstream sectors in space in general, and to organize at European levels such support, spinning in, spinning out, etc. Should be complementary to and build bridges with other alternatives. This is not a big funding for this, so we'll have to rely on other ongoing activities. There are local alternatives, there are EU initiatives, there are of course ESA activities as well, the incubators of ESA. So activities are supposed to be, adding something to those ongoing activities. Could be incubators, accelerators, hackathons, upcamps. We have seen some of this, of course, in these last few days here in Helsinki. And the creation of startups, applications, awareness raising activities, new services, etc. And with the ultimate goal, of course, like everyone has, to grow the number of small companies and startups in Europe in this area and increase the commercialization. So this is a topic which has the same deadline as the previous ones, 5th of March. Of course, in all these presentations today, we don't go into very much detail. There is, of course, the work program available on the participant portal with all the detailed information, and if there are questions, you can ask us directly by email, telephone, or there is also an inquiry function at the participant portal, which also will reach us. Okay, finally, so I will talk also about the prize. This is quite a new thing in Horizon Europe, that Commission with public funding is able to give prizes, so either recognition prizes or incentive prizes. This is an incentive prize, so we pose a challenge, and then hopefully there will be nominated candidates, and a jury will decide on a winner, potentially. We call it low-cost space launch, so the challenge is to develop European technologically non-dependent, I will explain that, solution for launching light satellites into low Earth orbit, which should enable dedicated low-cost launches with committed schedule and orbit. So we hope to achieve by this European low-cost access to space infrastructure and services dedicated to light satellites. Light satellites being up to a few hundred kilos at least. Could be CubeSats as well. Deadline for the application is June 2021, and there is a website, of course, you can also Google it, you will find it, which gives the detailed award criteria and explanation of how to apply. The technologically non-dependent, we will come back to that in a later topic as well. It means simply that we are not dependent. It's not that we are totally independent, but there should be critical components there. We should have access to that in Europe. As you know, excuse me, as you know, excuse me again. As you know, European IT sector in general and space also in particular rely a lot on non-European technology, of course. I mean, we're working with PowerPoint and Windows here. But we are not totally dependent, right? So non-dependence means simply that we can rely on foreign technology, foreign developed, US often technology for satellites and launchers, but critical components we should always have available in Europe as well. We should not be export restricted. So that's what it means, non-dependent. Okay, this is the website with the rules of contest, the template for application, low costs, space launch, infographics. The price is 10 million. Obviously, 10 million is not enough to build a rocket. So this is supposed to be activities that are funded elsewhere, either by private capital, so venture capital, or in EU-funded activities, or in other national activities. And the price is an incentive price, and gives then good publicity as well to the winner. Yeah, 12th. Okay, I don't know why this is here, to be honest. This should not be. Deadline. Deadline. So opening was on June 2018. Deadline, as I mentioned, should be June 2021. We will evaluate during June and October and award the prize in the last few months of 2021. That was the prize. We have something called, also in support of entrepreneurship and innovators, something called Innofin Space Equity Pilot. So in Horizon 2020, there is an activity called Innofin, Innovation Financing, where we work together with the European Investment Bank and European Investment Fund in order to provide risk capital, or to increase the availability of risk capital in Europe for entrepreneurs. And here we are now starting a specific earmarked funding window for space-related entrepreneurs. As I mentioned, implemented by European Investment Fund, and the whole idea is to provide funding from Horizon 2020, about 50 million, to EIB, EIF, and they will add another 50 million that they then will make available to venture capital companies or business angel networks that invest private money, more private money into space businesses. So it's not grants, it's not loans, it's equity. It's co-ownership of small growing or mid-cap companies. And the EIF, European Investment Fund, will establish a list of fund managers and companies that will be have access to this additional funding. So the overall size will be 111 million from Horizon 2020 and from European Investment Fund to enable a portfolio of 4 to 6 investments and co-investments in space-related technologies. So I think there is one more. I think I mentioned that. So they could be either focused on generalist funds that also invest in space technology, but also not space technologies, because of course it's not, a small company may not focus entirely on space, could be something that is usable for terrestrial markets, also usable for space. So this is very important, spin in, spin out, we talk about. The target final beneficiaries shall be active in the research development or operation of space and launcher systems, exploit space data, so downstream, transfer space technologies to non-space sectors or otherwise, exploit digital technologies for space technologies, so spin in, spin out. Upstream, downstream, so upstream technology development, downstream applications, early stage, expansion stage, and growth stage companies. Okay, so that covers very quickly what the ICEP, Innofin Space Equity Pilot is. Of course, it's very short, it's not gives any details, so please consult our websites through the participant portal and through EIF, EIB, or contact me or my colleagues directly. I wanted also to draw your attention to a short presentation later on, last presentation today actually, in the morning, on the future programs, because there's an upcoming program called Invest EU, which does the same things basically, but in a better way probably, from 2021. And this activity, Innofin Space Equity Pilot we have now, is a kind of a precursor to that, to sensitize and to enable investment companies and venture capital funds to invest more in space business. So thank you very much for your attention. I don't know if you have any questions on that short presentation, either now in plenum or during the break. I don't see any raised hands. So let's break now then for a short pause and reassemble 10 to 11 or quarter to 11. So at latest 9:50, and we continue the session with research and innovation for EU competitiveness, space technology, and EGNS in orbit demonstration, etc. So please come back 9:50. Sorry, 10:50. Sorry. 10:50, please. Thank you very much. So welcome to the second half of this session with a big fanfare and a nice video. Let's see now. We'll have now a short. No, well, not a short. We will have still some topics covering the work program of the call, which has a deadline in March. And I will talk about in-orbit demonstration validation, which is also an important aspect financed by Horizon 2020, but not in the same way with open calls. And we will have a presentation of EGNS infrastructure research. Some of it is done in-house in the Commission, some of it is done by ESA colleagues under a delegation agreement. So we will hear about that in this first sort of chapter of this session. And then we'll talk about, we'll have presentations from success stories from two projects, one on Copernicus applications and one on Galileo. And then we round off with a short overview of upcoming programs, including Horizon Europe. So may I have presentation number 5? There? Okay, that's good. That was the agenda. Okay, so here we go. So as you know, this is the work program in one slide. We had the left pillar, maximizing benefits of space for society and economy, which covers the applications and support and upstream research for Galileo and Copernicus and support entrepreneurship. We have the second one, which is the topic of this presentation, on global competitive innovative space sector, so technology development, enabling technologies, and a little bit about science. And then we have access to space and secure and safe space environment. These are objects and space surveillance and tracking, or space debris. So here in 2020, we'll only have a topic on space traffic management. So this slide really shows all the topics that have been addressed for the work program and for monitoring and coordinating Horizon 2020 space. The program itself is implemented by the GSA agency in Prague for Galileo applications, by Research Executive Agency in Brussels for other applications and research topics. And also we rely on ESA, European Space Agency, for some of the activities. Okay, so space technology, science and exploration. The focus really is on space technology development here. And you see on this slide the topics that have been addressed in the previous 2 years, 18 and 19, and will be addressed in the now open call with deadline in March. Space technology for non-dependence and competitiveness, space robotics in space electric propulsion, station keeping, satellite communication technologies, and finally, scientific data exploitation. So we get to, so there's quite a lot of information on this slide. Again, I advise those of you interested in particular call topics to really go to the funding and tenders portal, download the work program, space work program, and check all the information available on the funding and tenders portal. First of all, what is this? Non-dependence and European non-dependence and competitiveness. So these are specific support for technologies that are critical for space sector and urgently need a European solution for various reasons. Very often we rely, at least half of a European satellite, communication satellite or Earth observation satellite relies on non-EU technology. So this is normal in most of the society and information society we live in today. We rely on US companies primarily. Some of these technologies are export controlled and not easily accessible for European companies, especially if they want to re-export outside Europe. And some of these technologies are not just export control, but also not really open in the sense we don't know what's going on inside. So we have a process together with the European Defence Agency, European Space Agency, and the Commission to identify a list of such technologies which should be addressed in Horizon 2020 or in ESA or EDA programs. So the scope, so I think I covered most of that. Should be complementary to other activities. Spin in, of course, spin out. We rely on, for electronic components, for example, we of course don't develop anything from scratch. It's using existing knowledge, but space puts specific requirements, so we need to develop radiation-hardened technology, for example, technology that can withstand the environment in space. So of course there are roadmaps. There is a process at ESA. ESA and Commission together runs a technology harmonization activity or process which tries to prepare roadmaps for all these technologies. And so we rely on this, and we also ask applicants here to show that the technologies to be developed with the EU funding here do not actually rely on non-EU export restrictions, so that the companies participating are not controlled by non-European entities or rely on technologies which are restricted. So we hope to achieve impact, European capacity to operate independently, enhance competitiveness of European space industry, and reduce dependency on specific export-restricted technologies. Of course, we will always rely on technologies that are not necessarily made in Europe, but this is life. Recommended funding 1 to 3 million. Overall, we have 14 million. And there is a specific document available, a guidance document, which explains a bit more in detail the technologies to be addressed. And here you see the list of technologies to be addressed coming from that guidance document. For 2020, we talk about high-performance microprocessors, ultra reprogrammable system on chips, fiber optic photonic integrated technologies, power amplifiers, software tools, and advanced materials and material technology for combustion chambers. So these are the 6 technology lines to be addressed in this particular call. Previous years we had the other technology lines indicated there. And with 14 million we cannot address all of them perhaps, but we will select up to 1 proposal per technology line here. Again, for the details, please consult the guidance document available on the funding and tenders portal. So we have the next topic is on satellite communication technologies. We have, this is a more or less recurring topic as well. Not exactly every year, but every 2 years or so, we have a call topic on SATCOM. The SATCOM market is changing very rapidly. People don't watch TV anymore as before. They do it in a different way, video on demand and so on. So that changes, of course, the requirements on satellite technology as well to be used. And you know probably there are constellations of SATCOM satellites in low Earth orbit now, while classically this was a geostationary orbit, big satellites. Now we have constellations, or we will have constellations of many smaller satellites in lower orbit. So this requires very high throughput communication, integration with 5G in the near future, mega constellations, as I mentioned. So we need to prepare for that and continue to prepare for that. So we have a number of subtopics on this, from A to E there: secure, robust communication, including possibly quantum, bandwidth and transmission techniques, high-speed processing, flexible broadband, and active and passive antenna, ground system technologies. So we will select up to 1 proposal per topic. Of course, these are very broad topics. Some more detail is given in the work program, but again, there's plenty of scope for addressing the things you are interested in. We want to develop European research technology ecosystem in this area further and contribute to integration of SATCOM with 5G and stronger take-up of research results in general as well. Indicative budget 9 million, so we will fund about 3 or 4 projects in this area. This is a very market-near activity, but we still consider it a research and innovation action. So it's not absolutely near market, it's developing enabling technologies for future products. Industry, in particular SMEs, are expected to participate in this. Scientific data exploitation. So this may look like an odd bird in the context of technology development. We have, over the years, from FP7 actually, funded what we call scientific data exploitation. I mentioned it here because it stands by itself otherwise. It really is linked to the fact that Europe, let's say, prepares, funds, and launches very good scientific missions. This is done with ESA, in the ESA programs, with member states participating in developing the instruments. The problem is that until now, for decades, it's been the case that we don't have research funding to actually exploit the results sufficiently. There is some funding, of course, for exploiting the, for example, Rosetta comet data, but after a few years, this usually tapers out, and there's much more value in these data assembled in scientific missions than is currently exploited in Europe. It's exploited by our American friends because they have funding. So we are providing some funding here for European teams to actually make use of this valuable data in ESA archives and other archives to join forces and to do science on this space data. This is also suitable for international cooperation, and one can imagine European teams teaming up with non-European colleagues, very often US, working already together. Focus is on European missions, but many missions are joint missions, anyway, international missions with Russia or US. So we're not too strict about that. I think that covers basically. Okay, so then we have something called strategic research clusters. I will not go into detail to explain exactly everything what there is about that. The idea here was to, for a few areas, space robotics and electric propulsion were selected. For those 2 areas, we wanted to have a more planned way of doing the research, in the sense that we didn't want to just launch projects bottom up, let's say, and hope that they make sense together. We wanted to try to plan in advance so that a cluster of projects actually do make sense together, and that they collaborate, exchange IPR, and work together jointly to achieve a bigger goal. And to this end, the projects are independent research projects, but they are linked together by a collaboration agreement, which regulates how they should work together. Maybe there should be a comparative evaluation at the end with other technologies, or there should be an exchange of IPR, or IPR should be made available to other projects. So this is the idea here. And there are 2 coordination and support action to support this activity, 1 for each project. For the robotics project, we are developing, the idea is to have a demonstration of a specific technology. There are 2 strands you will see on the next slide. one addressing on-orbit robotics and one addressing planetary surface robots. And as I said, they should include a demonstration and to improve future missions in this area. The robotics, so this is a bit too busy and complicated, but basically the idea here is to show there was a call in 2016 for basic technologies on space robotics, addressing such things as a robotic operating system specific for space applications, sensors, and sensor fusion, and autonomy framework, and so on. So there were 5 such building blocks, plus a 6th one which was about evaluation. And in the 2018 call, these building blocks were used to develop applications for on-orbit assembly of large structure, for example, or for navigating a rover on a Mars-like terrain, using the building blocks developed in the first round of calls. And in 2020 call, which is now open, there is a preparation to use these applications to prepare for an actual demonstration a couple of years later, an orbital demonstrator and a planetary demonstrator. So the call looks like this. Again, there is a guidance document available on the Funding and Tenders portal, which explains a bit the context, explains the content and the result of the running projects, and so the context in which a proposal should situate themselves when they apply. Okay, I think I covered that. In-orbit demonstration, mission study, advanced robotics, planetary exploration. So for the first one, it's actually intended to do an on-orbit demonstration in the 2023-2024 timeframe. And for the second one, for the robotics, it's not intended to go to Mars directly. It will be a demonstration on a Mars-like or Moon-like terrain on Earth. So 9 million euro, this is not research as such, it's more planning, it's studies that will prepare them for these demonstrations coming up. And that would ultimately be funded under Horizon Europe. So for the electric propulsion station keeping, of course, electric propulsion, you might know, is something which has been now very much established, I think. Many satellites are built already with electric propulsion on them for station keeping, for moving between orbits and so on. Not for launching, but for moving between orbits and for attitude control and things like that. So we have a strategic research cluster dealing with that, and it looks like this. Again, too complicated, don't even bother about the details. The main message is we have an incremental line which addresses 3 main technology lines and try to improve. And then we have a disruptive line which is open to new ideas, and also on thrusters, but also on supporting systems like power electronics. And the particular call we have now in 2020 is about incremental technologies. So we talk about the established, more or less established technologies, Hall effect thrusters, gridded ion engines, and high efficiency multi-stage plasma thrusters. And we will select 6 projects in total, 3 projects addressing the low power regime, and 2 projects for the medium power, and 1 project for the high power regime. Again, a guidance document, very important for anyone applying here to read carefully the guidance document, which explains much more in detail what has been going on and what is expected. 24 million euro for this one. I think I will skip this. Finally, there is one core topic under space security I mentioned, space traffic management. There is also a big action on space surveillance and tracking. I will not go into the details. This is not an open call. It's about providing a system for monitoring space debris. It's already an existing consortium of member states dealing with this. And anyone who is interested can contact me for further information. But for space traffic management, this is a coordination and support action. And this is basically in order to use the knowledge an SST system would bring, knowledge about where debris and other satellites are orbiting, to make sure that you avoid collision. It's a big issue. It's a global issue. It's not a specific European problem. It's a global problem. And the space traffic needs to be somehow managed in the future because the new space and the lower entry costs to send things into orbit is now generating a much larger number of objects orbiting, and therefore a higher risk of collision and other problems. So the long-term sustainability of space operations. We need to maintain autonomy for safely accessing using space, therefore. And the scope of this particular action is to network stakeholders, private and public sector, in order to assess technologies, capabilities, and best practice and standards, take into account what's already happening under the SST, Space Surveillance and Tracking EU program, and corresponding ESA programs on clean space and clean sat, as well as international efforts at United Nations level, and to propose a set of space traffic management guidelines and best practices. This is in order to take it further to the future. We need to start getting our act together, basically, networking European actors in this area. Okay, that covers the space technology, science and security part of the call closure 5th of March. Again, all the information available on the Funding and Tenders portal. The link is there, or just Google it, you'll find it immediately. Before handing over the floor now to my colleague from Galileo, I will cover, I think, presentation number 6, please. I will cover in-orbit demonstration and validation, which is, well, as you know, we develop technologies, components, subsystems, or even scientific experiments, or as we had recently, debris capture mechanisms. Can we have presentation number 6? Thank you, very good. And these are developed on Earth, and sometimes they can be tested on Earth as well. Many things can be tested on Earth in various, there are many test facilities around Europe for doing that, but some things can only be tested in orbit. So how do we do that? It's been it's been always a problem, finding a flight opportunity, getting on board, integrating, not risking the main payload, the main satellite, the main customer, so to say, of the launch, and then a launch delay, another half year or so on. So it's a well-recognized problem that we are lacking capacity, we're lacking opportunities for flying subsystem systems and components and testing in space. So we are trying together with ESA to start a system, at least, of which ultimately we hope would yield recurrent flight opportunities for such in-orbit demonstration and validation using European launchers. So at this stage we're using Arianespace as a partner, and Vega and Ariane 6 as launch vehicles, and to aggregate many small satellites and experiments onto one launch. That's the idea. Of course, in the future, we might have also the opportunity to launch small satellites and experiments using small launchers, but we're not there yet. And for the moment, we're running this way. So there is a need to demonstrate and validate in real condition to reduce risk. New technologies can be required, and we need recurrent institutional or commercial missions. As I mentioned already, difficult to find such opportunities, and there should be some kind of regularity and a reasonably cost-effective way of doing this. And this is, again, a bit busy. I just wanted to say that we have been running a call for expression of interest, and we have a number of such candidates for flying. And these experiments, as we call them, have been developed, of course, outside this activity, is funded by other sources. And we have now selected the actions, and we are preparing a mission and integrating onto the launcher together with ESA and Arianespace, and integrators who will do the work. The first flight is scheduled to take place, was scheduled to take place in September. It was Vega, but has been postponed till March. Let's see, yeah, so we have the timing here. Q4, proposal evaluation following invitation to tenders for aggregation of experiments, kickoff of contracts. So Q1, we can say March, Vega, SSMS, proof of concept flight with at least one of our experiments on board. And in 2021, Ariane 6 MLS, proof of concept flight. And then further on, other ride-shared and piggyback opportunities. In the second quarter of next year, we are discussing a second potential cutoff date for a call for expression of interest. The call for expression of interest is continuously open, but we have already selected the first batch, so to say. And there's now the discussion to potentially select a second batch. It will also depend a little bit about the funding situation with Horizon Europe. But the idea is to try to bring this to a state where we can have recurrent, if it will, once a year or once every 6 months or once every 2 years, but recurrent and cost-effective way of launching small payloads for demonstration validation into space. When it comes to research program, then the research budget for those particular projects may include a cost for flying, a flight ticket cost. For private industry, they will have to pay their own flight ticket cost, not in this first round because we are piloting the scheme, but in the future, if we have a recurrent scheme of such opportunities, there will be some kind of cost attached to that, but it should be cost effective. That's the idea. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention of these 2 short presentations. Don't know if you have any questions on either the technology development part of the call or the IOD, IOV at this stage. Please, don't be shy. One question here.
Hi, Pablo Ruiz from The Blue Globe. Thank you for the presentation. My question is, I have seen these IOD, IOV activities from ESA side. Are the same ones? Yeah. Or so if the implementation process is through ESA, or are these complementary activities but with 2 different processes, so the application should be through the European Commission portal?
Okay, thank you. Good question. Maybe I wasn't clear. We're doing it with ESA, meaning we delegate to ESA to do the work, and the ESA also contracts the integrators to do the integration which is needed, and Arianespace for the launch. Funding comes from us, from Horizon 2020. ESA, and we will have, but the call for expression of interest was managed by the Commission. And we do it together with ESA again. Now we have very good cooperation with ESA colleagues on this. It is possible ESA has some other activities as well under ARTES program and some other activities which are not linked directly to this. So if that was the question, there are some other opportunities, and they are more agnostic when it comes to which launcher they use. They could use very well American launchers. In this particular action now, we are committed to using European launchers. This is part of the space strategy for Europe. So, okay, thank you very much. I think we should move now to the next presentation. So we'll have Eric Guyader talking about EGNOS infrastructure R&D, mission and services. And we need then presentation number 7, please. Yes, it's already there. I need to go back.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Good morning, everyone. For those of you who were not there yesterday, I'm Eric Guyader, working in the European Commission in the team I'm responsible for defining the evolution of EGNSS. So yesterday I presented the state of play, where we are for the evolution, which is quite stabilized by now, thanks, by the way, to the R&D activity we launched. And I would like to present to you, actually, this morning, what have been those activities in R&D and what are the few that are still scheduled for next year. So maybe a word of caution. I will present to you the R&D for upstream R&D. So in terms of definition, we understand upstream technology or upstream activity, everything that is touching upon the mission, the definition of new mission concepts, of new services, and the consolidation of technology and assessments of new architectures. So it has a lot to do with the actual mission of EGNSS and about the infrastructure. So to some extent, nothing to do with the downstream activities. So this is the opposite of downstream, which is managed by GSA, and Reinhard presented to you this morning. So we actually use a lot H2020 to come to maturity on the ideas we had for Galileo. And we use it extensively on two sides. One leg of activity was devoted to studying new mission concepts, as I said. This was under direct management by the European Commission. And another leg was devoted to studying new architectures, basically raising the technological readiness level for all technologies that would be required to support or to be implemented in G2G. That part, that leg, was fully delegated to ESA. This makes the management of this R&D a bit particular from my point of view. On one side, we had to manage the work program of the European Commission, where we, just what Mats presented to you, we have some activities described here. And on the other side, we have work plans that are established by the European Space Agency, because we delegate the budget to them. And so it's an equivalent mechanism, I would say, but on one side, we write the specification on our document, and on the other side, ESA writes the specifications, or at least the topics to be funded. Here in light gray, I don't enter into detail because this was managed directly by GSA. This is just to remind you that we had quite an extensive effort as well on receiver development, receiver activities, and specific R&D on applications, but that was fully managed by GSA, just to show you that the corpus of R&D is really complete on the Galileo side. So here, just graphical way of representing what I just said. You see the two legs and the budget associated to it. This is the structure under which we worked for 5 years for the upstream R&D. So you see on the left-hand side the part devoted to, directly managed by the European Commission. This is the study of new services, the study of new mission concepts for Galileo, so 25 million euro. And on the right-hand side, the blue box is all the parts dedicated to ESA with much higher budget for this. The green boxes show you the inputs that we used, because we didn't start from scratch, evidently, to define the evolution of Galileo, and we did not feed the R&D with nothing. We had preliminary ideas. On the mission side, we used the intelligence we had internally. We used the Joint Research Center, for example, in ISPRA, to help us understand what would be the situation in the future with respect to the other GNSS. So GPS, GLONASS, and Beidou are carrying out their own modernization efforts. We need to know, we need to anticipate this in advance to understand what would be the situation in 20 years. So JRC was really instrumental there to help us understand this picture. The GSA was key, of course, to help us understand as well the market trend, the evolution of the user needs in the future. And we used as well our own activity that we undertake daily at the European Commission, notably through our activities at international level in bilateral discussions. We have, for example, established working groups with the Americans to define joint approaches, cooperation on GNSS, where we derive lessons learned and recommendations for evolution. So this box on the left-hand side was really the internal intelligence that we used to create the R&D program on the mission services. For the technological side, ESA had previously in place its own program that you may be aware of. It was called in the past EGEP, the European GNSS Evolution Program, which ran from 2007 to 2013, and that provided all the necessary preliminary knowledge, phase 0A type of activities to test technology, to test relevant architectures that could be candidates for G2G in the future. So really a consolidated approach with solid inputs flowing into our own activities, and then we derive the R&D plans. This is the results on the mission services part. This is the portfolio of services that we have came up with after all the activities we did. So I presented this extensively yesterday, but in a few words, I can tell you that all of those services have been the subjects of a dedicated project that we published from 2014 to now. So each of them was a project led by industry, and that helped us validate those mission concepts and tell us where we need to put more efforts and what is mature for introduction in the G2G program. Same thing for the technology. I presented it yesterday as well. So ESA carried out a lot of efforts in developing, in rising the TRL for technology, for ground segment and for space segment. You see here a few examples. I just shown the most critical components of a space program, at least for a navigation perspective. Clocks, amplifiers, signal generation units, all those components have been the subjects of R&D efforts led by ESA. On the ground segment, we worked as well. We developed some dedicated technologies notably on the stations, on the GSS stations, receivers, algorithms for orbits, radio frequency constellation simulators, and EGNOS technology has been the subject of some dedicated activity too. Voilà, so that's a quick summary of the activity we carried out. Maybe one information I should have given to you, the profile of expenditure for this R&D upstream program was front-loaded. This means that we put a lot of effort at the very beginning of this program, so in the years 2014, 2015, that was needed to launch a bit the machine and to make sure we would be ready by now with a consolidated mission for G2G. The consequence of it is that there's very little budget left now. We are reaching the end of the program. So you will see in the coming slides, there is still a bit of activity, but not as substantial as it used to be. In terms of dissemination, we've been quite transparent. We have published a lot of results. First, we invited the projects under mission and services, so acronym MAS, mission and services. We had a workshop with the projects that were finished in 2018. We put them on stage, they presented the results, And we have the idea to reenact this initiative next year with the other projects that would have been finished by then. Same with the ESA type projects, with the technological ones. We had a big workshop this year. It was in May at ESTEC, where we showed all the results and achievements. And we publish the results on dedicated websites. So the one on the Europa portal, where you see some results of projects, and similar for ESA. There is a dedicated portal where they present the results of their projects. The announcement of opportunities are published on 2 platforms. This is again the consequence of having a delegated budget to ESA. So one platform we use is the European Commission platform, TED, Tender Electronic Daily, where you see all the new calls and tenders that are published. On ESA, it's on EMIT, the well-known platform. Interestingly, we've been asked to publish 2 months in advance of publication what we call a PIN, PRN, Preliminary Information Notice. This is because we got the feedback from you and from your member states that you required a bit more time in advance of a publication of a tender to prepare yourself and to team up with consortium. So we are now putting in place this regularly, and we inform 2 months in advance when we intend to publish a dedicated activity. Same for ESA, where an abstract is published 2 weeks in advance as per the usual procedure. Coming to the concrete activities, so you see here the actions that we plan to launch as part of the 2019 work program on mission and services. So this is clearly something that is in the work program 2019 of the H2020 for space. So 2 opportunities. The pins have been published already. One is on EGNOS service for payment and liability critical applications for the road sector. And the other one is on studying rail safety services. The amounts are in the order of 300,000 euro each. The details are on the PIN that has been published. For 2020, next year, we have an earmarked budget of 2 million euro. We have some ideas about topics to be funded, but we cannot talk about it at the moment. This is still under definition, but we can already inform about, I'm finishing. And this is the last slide, the opportunities upcoming for the technological and architecture leg of this R&D program. You see there are several ITTs still to be published by ESA, so on EMIT, I recall. They are part of past work plans. They have not been published yet, but it's about to be the case between now and Q2 next year. So you see a variety of topics to be published from EGNOS or a grand segment of Galileo, even space segment topics are lined up here. Regarding the 2020 work plan, we don't intend to have any activity on this leg because most, or at least we will focus on completing the ongoing projects, which are quite numerous, you can imagine. I think this is all. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any question, feel free to ask or to come to see me during the break.
Thank you, Eric. So we don't have, if there's one pressing question we can take, but we're running a little bit short of time. So I suggest if you have questions, will you stay? You stay, yeah? You stay for lunch and so on.
Yeah, I stay.
Yeah.
I stay for
Eric,
lunch.
he will be available for bilateral questions. Of course, these are not part of the open calls for proposals with a 5 March deadline. They have different deadlines, and the ITTs are call for tenders, obviously, so they are follow a slightly different scheme. But all the information is available, and if there are any questions, please approach Eric anytime, today, tomorrow.
Today and tomorrow
Today
till
and tomorrow.
lunch. Yeah.
Even. Very good. Thank you, Eric. Now we should proceed to the next point on the agenda, which is the Horizon 2020 success stories. And we have two projects. So EOMODES, I think we would have first. Do we have the representative from this project here? Yes. Saku? Is that Saku? Okay, joint presentation, 2 persons. So this is presentation number 8, normally then on the, please prepare, put on. Yep, give the floor to Dimitri Papadakis first.
Thank you, Mats.
Welcome.
Hi. Okay, good morning, everyone. So I'm here with my colleague Saku from the Finnish Environment Agency. We're going to split this presentation into 2 parts. My part will be the first and the shortest with a general overview. And then my colleague will go into a little bit more detail about the production aspects for the territory of Finland. So, EOMODES is a Horizon 2020 project, which we have been involved in now for a couple of years. The project concerns the monitoring of inland and coastal water bodies. So the question you might be asking yourself is, why would we want to monitor lakes and other inland water bodies as well as coastal areas? Well, lakes and inland water bodies are essential parts of the hydrological cycle, and they provide a whole range of ecological services as well as economic importance to society. For example, in tourism, in recreation, and in fishing. So it is essential that these waters are monitored, and indeed there is a legal basis for the status of these water bodies to be carefully observed. We know this in the European format chiefly by the name of the Water Framework Directive, which obliges member states to set up national systems for monitoring and reporting the status of these water bodies. So everybody in the EU has to take care of monitoring their lakes and water bodies, and in most cases, member states implement monitoring systems which rely on traditional sample-based monitoring. This means inspectors have to go out, visit the water body, and take physically a water sample, send it off to a laboratory for processing, wait for the results to come back, and then you have some data, which you have a very detailed amount of data about a very specific point. So there are issues with these systems. They are limited in space, and they are limited in time, and they are very expensive. So enter EOMODES. And what we are proposing, I'm sorry, the slides are in a slightly different order. Yep. So what we are proposing in EOMODES is to bring into this image the power of satellite-based Earth observation, the power of specialized automated in situ monitoring, and the power of numerical modeling, bringing together these other data sources. And on this slide, you can see a comparison of those 3 styles of monitoring compared to manual water quality. I won't mention each cell, but of course, satellites give this broad coverage, so you obtain spatial extent, and you also have a higher revisit time than what you would do with the manual sampling. We are in EOMODES proposing a specialized in situ instrument that can monitor autonomously a specific point in time using a optical device which reports every 15 minutes. And when you take the low-cost satellite information combined with the high-frequency in situ, and you plug that into a model, you can really get some quite interesting forecasting possibilities for forecasting the extent and distribution of algal blooms. And so all of this compares very favorably with manual sampling, which it does not intend to replace, but merely to augment. Now, I'm trying to go backwards. So just a couple more words about the project. As I said, we started a couple of years ago. It lasts for 3 years. We have a 2-month extension, so we are now finalizing our project and looking to wrap it up. But we are launching a commercial set of services on the basis of this work. We have a commercial website already up and running, and we will be ready with a commercial product portfolio released in the beginning of next year. And you can please feel free to check out those resources and see what we are offering. We have a user workshop. Apologies for the small typo. It is next month. It is on the 20th of January. It will be held in Amsterdam at Schiphol Airport. Please do check that out as well if you are interested in these services. Okay, so this is a high-level overview of the areas of interest, the thematic areas of interest which our services can help water authorities and interested stakeholders to monitor. I don't have time for the details, unfortunately, but I will now pass on to my colleague, Saku Antila from the Finnish Environment Agency. Thank you.
Good morning from my part as well. I continue with a little more specific case on how Earth observation is used in water quality monitoring in Finland to produce services. I'm Saku Anttila from Finnish Environment Institute, and there's a long list of colleagues who have contributed this work. Finland has really long and rugged coastal line with thousands of islands, and we also have our inner land is a spot with thousands of lakes. So this makes for us a little challenge to monitor all of these areas. For example, for the Water Framework Directive, we have to monitor more than 4,500 lakes and 250 coastal areas. And this obviously makes Earth observation quite tempting for us to develop methods. So for these purposes, we have created 2 services. Tarkka is web-based services that utilizes Sentinel-2 and 3 data as well as Landsat data and derived water quality products and provides them free online on the web. Then we have a status service for the environmental authorities in Finland that provides more accurate and aggregated statistical data for the Water Framework Directive purposes. And here are a few examples from the Tarkka service. On the top left, there's an image from Sentinel-2 showing outflow of turbid water in the springtime to the Baltic Sea. On the top right, there's a dredging event in the eastern coast of Finland. On the bottom left, if you continue there, there's an upwelling event in the very north of the Baltic Sea near the Hailuoto island, where the cold water comes up from the bottom near the island. And the on the bottom left, there's one Water Framework Directive area that we have to monitor with the algae blooms in the southern part of it. And with the red spots, there's marked those manual sampling stations where we get really few samples annually compared to satellite data. Status, on the other hand, is targeted for the environmental authorities. It brings more statistical data that is targeted for the Water Framework Directive assessment and monitoring purposes. It gives distributions from the different monitoring methods, including Earth observations, and also time series of different kind of observation types. And this service is already integrated to our legislative work for monitoring these areas. And all of these processes are automated from the Copernicus data sources. through these national services, and we collaborate quite intensely with this Finnish Meteorological Institute. So there's no manual interventions between at all at the moment. Just to summarize, so we have these services, Tarkka and Status, are utilized already in the VFD or Water Framework Directive reporting, and they utilize Copernicus data for that one. And it is Earth observation is quite powerful tool for environment monitoring. It is used already in, for example, monitoring algae blooms, for dredging event, construction work, and so on in Finland. Just would like to advertise a little bit our project deliverable, one white paper of that should announce that the remote sensing or Earth observation should be recognized as a method in the coming revision of our Water Permit Directive that's currently being under work. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Any questions? Any questions on this for Saku or Dimitri? Okay, again, I think you will be here. Do you have a stand also? No? No stand. But they'll be here, so if you're interested, approach bilaterally and get more information. Thank you very much. Thank you. So for the next project is Strike 3. We have Mr. Sahidul. Sorry, complicated for me. Sahidul, who will explain to us. Please, floor is yours.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How
You have
do
a
I?
presentation. You see here?
Okay, yes, so on then.
Yeah, that advances. You can go back as well.
Yes, okay.
And you see.
Okay, yes. Good morning, everybody. So I'm Jahidul Bhunyan from Finnish Geospatial Research Institute. So I will be presenting today one of the projects that we have been doing in the framework of Horizon 2020, which ended beginning of this year. So the topic of the project was mainly about GNSS and GNSS signal monitoring and kind of knowing how from a global perspective, so what is the threat of GNSS when we are thinking of from a spectrum point of view, that how it is the interference is affecting the GNSS user community. So if we, yes, so. Yes, I think I can, yes. So the project is a 3-year project, and as I mentioned that we have kind of monitor the GNSS interference with a global network of stations in different countries in the world. And with that, we have proposed some interference reporting standard, and as well as we did extensive receiver testing with many different kind of receivers, and also we kind of propose how the receiver testing should be done in case of some interferences. So there are seven partners, including FGI as a sub, and the prime of the project was from Nottingham Scientific Limited from UK, and there are partners from Sweden, Germany, and also India and South Korea. And as you could see that this is a nice consortium, because there are entities from research institutes, from companies who are building the products, and also there are these Defense Forces Research Institute. So ideally, this is a nice value chain for a project to be successful. Yes. So the main problem that we address within the project is the GNSS interference monitoring in general. So from the beginning of this decade, so from 8 to 10 years from now, so what really happened is that the GNSS users started to see the disruption in the GNSS service slowly, and then in recent years it has been really very much global. And within the project, what we tried is to kind of see the big picture by establishing many stations around the globe and trying to capture the real picture that what is happening, especially on the GNSS spectrum, and how we could tackle it, and kind of aware the authorities that, okay, there has been this kind of incidents, and you should kind of take some actions because GNSS is a core part of our safety critical applications. Okay, so I will present some monitoring results here. So within the project, what we did is we placed some monitoring stations in different sites, and then the main objective is to detect those interference events and characterize and classify, and then inform the authorities that, okay, there are this kind of incidents in the spectrum, and the incidents have this kind of impact on the GNSS signal. So this would somehow help to protect the GNSS spectrum. And so far we have about 50 monitoring sites, as you could see from here, varying from many countries in Europe and also in Asia. And the sites were there for about from 3 months to about a couple of years. In Finland, we had three detector sites, and out of that 3, we have still 1 site deployed in one major airport. And we have been continuously getting some kind of report of what is happening on the GNSS spectrum. And the stakeholders, as you could see, that there are a lot of varying stakeholders, from Civil Aviation Authority to port authorities to border control stations to Traffic Regulatory Authority to receiver manufacturers. So there are a lot of broad stakeholder groups who are associated with this activity. And I will brief you with updates. So what we didn't do within the strike 3 is we didn't kind of attempt to address any regulatory aspects of the frequency protection. So we just aware the regulatory authority that there is this kind of threat seen in a global scale, and you should take some actions in regard to that. And also we didn't try to localize the interference incident, so that is probably going to be the next step that we can do in some continuation project. And all the data that we kind of have in the database, they are actually anonymized. Okay. So this is the dissemination part. And as you could see that we have had about 11 papers and a few journal articles, and one of them is actually got this Best Journal Award from Royal Institute of Navigation in 2018. And we have been actually participating in different conferences, and also we are quite active, or we receive actually many invitations from US, for example, this US Department of Homeland and Securities and United Nations. They have been asking us to give some presentations on the status of the project time to time. And also within the project, we have 1 patent on the testing of PNT configuration, and also some products that have been actually kind of already sold, and there have been a lot of business activities that are involved. So here I will present some monitoring status. that we have so far within the 3-year time frame with 50 monitoring stations. So as you could see that most of those signals are kind of wideband in nature, and they do not have much impact on the GNSS signal. But then the red ones that you could see are the chirp signals, which are the ones that are dangerous for the GNSS receivers. And those could really impact badly if they are close in. And here is the kind of impact-wise. So number 2 and number 3 are the most impactful, and they are not the majority. So only 5% of those events are kind of impacting the GNSS receiver. So here you could see the signatures that we are kind of detecting at different monitoring sites. So a huge number of those ones are mostly unintentional kind, and they are not really impacting the GNSS performance that much. But then there are some kind of real jammers, and which could be really quite impactful on the receivers depending on where it is located. And there should be, from receiver manufacturer's point of view, they could really kind of do some research and investigation that how they could mitigate this, and if it is possible also to locate these jamming incident sources. Okay. So for the reporting, the main objective is to kind of have some compatibility between different systems from different manufacturers, so that they could report the same event in a similar way, and also that could minimize extra work from reporting point of view. And we have actually offered our a publication on that, and also proposed a draft standard, so anybody could kind of utilize the same reporting scheme. For the paper that I was mentioned, that we received a award in June 2019, this year, from Her Royal Highness Princess Anne of UK, this year for the societal impact that Strike 2 has made to the society. So this is one achievement that we had. So I will tell briefly about the receiver testing activities that we did for about a year in 2018. So this is the test architecture that you could see. So I will not probably go into detail here, but this is a very standard testing procedure that we did. And this is some signatures, representative signatures that we had out of these 500,000 events. So based on number of occurrences, number of impact, the impact on the receivers, and also considering the evolving nature of the signal. So here you could see the impact on a mass market receiver grade. As you could see, the performance is really going bad when we are kind of introducing interference. And this is for a professional grade receiver, and you could see that it is not really able to offer any solution to you when it is exposed to interference. And this is some kind of statistics, and you could see that the professional grade receiver is not able to offer you a good quality navigation solution. Mass market receivers could give you some navigation solution, but then the availability, the accuracy is quite poor. Yes, so the recommendations that we made is that any critical infrastructure that are kind of relying on GNSS must have to have this kind of GNSS monitoring and reporting kind of capabilities. So the entity who is basically maintaining that should be aware of such kind of disruption and take necessary actions immediately. So as a follow-on, so there is this open tender from GSA, just published in October 2019. So this is this follow-up project called Advanced Development of Advanced Interference Detection and Robustness Capability System. The submission deadline is January 23, and the Strike 3 Consortium is planning to actually apply for this project. Yes, so here are some references that you can get, And I will end my presentation with some really nice results of Galileo E5 signal, which are the the most advanced signals. So as you could see from here, that the resolution gets much better, the precision gets much better, and the accuracy also gets much better if you use Galileo E5 signal. And there can be different combinations that you can make with Galileo E5A and B. And it also has this Galileo E5 old box kind of capabilities, and the performance get much, much better with this. Yes, so that is my presentation. So if you have any question, I will be here also during the lunch break. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Zahidul. Were there any questions? Yeah, there's one question over there. Please stay. Yeah, just speak.
Okay, good morning everyone. Ferdinando Dolce, Project Officer Space at the European Defense Agency. I'm working on PNT and dealing with these kind of topics, and I'm sure you are aware that during military operation, the threats on GNSS systems increase a lot. So the question is if you are planning in the next phase of the project to involve the European External Action Service and the European OHQ to monitoring in the area of EU operation how evolve the threats on GNSS.
So your question is about the evolution of GNSS jamming signatures. So how will you tackle that in particular?
The question is if you are planning to involve the European External Action Service and the European Operational Headquarters during the operation to check and to monitor the evolution of the threats in this area, during the area of the defense and security operations.
Yes, I think.
Okay, maybe,
Yes.
I don't know if you want to comment. It's maybe it's quite specific question, also linked to the military use of the service, I guess. So maybe we can take it bilaterally. I don't have the answer.
Yeah, I
You don't have the answer.
Yes.
Okay. So, but clearly, all this work is very important. I mean, it shows that the systems are sensitive to some extent, and that work is being done in order to safeguard the system. As we rely more and more, of course, on positioning for civilian use as well as governmental use, and yeah, when we rely on that, we become also vulnerable to any disturbance. Of course, this is very, very important work. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Okay, so we will move. We move to the final presentation. We're slightly behind schedule, but that's no problem. We will finish as scheduled at 12:30. Wanted to take the opportunity now to spend a little bit of time on the next upcoming programs here. So let's do it like this. Okay. So many of you maybe have questions on that, and I'm afraid that maybe not all questions can be answered at this stage. So we, as you know, there are a number of programs coming up. Horizon Europe, the space program, and Invest EU are the ones I intend to cover here. They're all, the space program and the research part of Horizon Europe for space is delivering on these priorities of the space strategy to maximize benefits of space for society and economy, to foster a globally competitive space sector, reinforce autonomy and accessing and using space, and strengthen Europe's role as a global actor, promote international cooperation. You saw this already previously. The current programs are that are funded at the EU level from the EU budget are Copernicus, Galileo, EGNOS, and Horizon 2020, with about 12 billion euro in total, in addition to what is done at member state level and through the ESA programs, of course. and also privately, I mean, in space industry. Okay, so the programs we look at primarily for the future here is a space program, a 16 billion euro. These are the proposals by the Commission, published already in 2018. So it's important to note, of course, here that ultimately these are taxpayers' money coming from the member states, and it's up to the member states to decide how much they really want to spend on the EU budget, and this is a discussion which is ongoing as we speak, I mean, and will be ongoing for a while because it's not easy. And that may impact, of course, the budget envelopes on these programs. So the space program would encompass Galileo, EGNOS, and Copernicus, plus 2 more programs I will show you later. Horizon Europe, around 100 billion in the proposal from the Commission, and Invest EU, that is supporting entrepreneurship and growth in the space industry, is about 38 billion in total. So it's significant funding for investments in space and entrepreneurship, industrial growth. So the space program, so the novelty here is that we had in the current framework, we have Galileo program, Copernicus program, 2 separate programs. Of course, there are many commonalities. Both programs use satellites, and satellites have common building blocks. Both systems generate signals and services, or potential for services, and some of these services are really using both Copernicus, Galileo, and maybe satellite communication or 5G as well. So it makes sense to bring it all together. And I have only 1 slide on the EU space program. The existing systems, Galileo, EGNOS, and Copernicus, and new systems we have already started to pilot under Horizon 2020 research, space surveillance and space situational awareness, which includes space surveillance and tracking, space debris monitoring, and near-Earth objects, and space weather. So all these aspects are, of course, important for space infrastructure and for services and applications and infrastructure on ground. ESA as well has an important program on space security, space safety, I think they call it now for the future. It was space situational awareness. So we are working with ESA also to make sense that we are doing things in a complementary fashion. Another new program is GovSatcom. So it's satellite communication for governmental applications, secure satellite communication. And this is also being piloted, and you saw maybe in previous versions of the work program this 2019 call actually had a GovSatcom topic. So the preliminary budget split there is shown. So for Galileo, Copernicus, and the SSA GovSatcom. SSA and GovSatcom, of course, are new programs, quite small by comparison to the already operational or initial operation of Copernicus and Galileo programs. Maybe one should mention also that access to space, support of startup, and security aspects are like horizontal cross-cutting considerations which are important for all these programs, all these sub-programs. Okay, so Horizon Europe. Again, you can find information about this on this long website there, but I think it's better to use our American friends and use Google to find it easily. Horizon Europe 20, I think this is totally wrong, okay. Should be 2021 to 2027, not 2012. Budget of 100 billion in the Commission proposal again. We have a quarter of this budget goes to the open science part, which is really more, which is encompassing what is currently known as European Research Council, research infrastructure, Marie Sklodowska-Curie mobility grants, etc. And then you have the global competitiveness, global challenges and industrial competitiveness, which is half of the budget, and the rest is used for open innovation, so the European Innovation Council actions, which is now a pilot under Horizon 2020, and some smaller activities, including Euratom and European Research Area. Of this funding, 3.5 billion is to be allocated under the InvestEU. So there's a link between Horizon Europe and InvestEU, as we shall see. For comparison, 80 billion, or between 75 and 80 billion for Horizon 2020. Space at that time had 1.5 billion in the current program. For Horizon Europe, there is no specific earmarking of the budget at the level of space or ICT. We shall see how that works. So the structure, the architecture of the program is basically similar to Horizon 2020. We have 3 pillars, we call it like pillars very much. So you have the excellent science pillar, which is very similar to the current one in Horizon 2020, just bigger budget. European Research Council, Marie Skłodowska-Curie to be correct, and the research infrastructure. And pillar 2 then, which I mentioned, global challenges and competitiveness, is very large. It includes a number of clusters, of which we have a cluster on digital industry and space, but also clusters on health, culture, creativity, climate, energy, mobility, food and natural resources. And the Joint Research Center also gets funding from here. So you can see that pillar 2, if you compare it to Horizon 2020, really is the combination of leadership in enabling industrial technologies plus societal challenges into one pillar. So it's about half the program budget, as mentioned. So if we focus on the digital industry and space program cluster, we have a number of activities there, of which space is only one. We have manufacturing, digital technologies, advanced materials, emerging enabling technologies, artificial intelligence and robotics, next generation internet, advanced computing, big data, circular industry, low carbon, clean industry, and space. So it's a lot. But you can also see there is no clear differentiation. I mean, space relies on advanced material, digital technologies, enabling technologies, robotics, space robotics and robotics. So there's a lot of commonality in here, and the work program, the challenge for us in the work program is to define a work program for the first 2 years, which will happen during next year, which reflects all the priorities of this pillar number 4, digital industry and space. There will be space-dedicated activities, but there will probably also be activities which are more broad scope, like AI and robotics. There will be even a partnership on artificial intelligence and robotics, and we hope to get space in there as well. So I think the work program for Horizon Europe will look a little bit different from what we're used to. Will be more integrated in a way, and no clear earmarking of space versus ICT versus something else. We hope that we'll be helped by the fact that we have one commissioner for Connect and Grow and the defense and defense industry and space. So we'll have an interesting discussion with our colleagues about this. But work is already starting with this, obviously. So, and pillar 3, not to forget, European Innovation Council, European Institute of Innovation and Technology. So EIC, European Innovation Council, already has a pilot activity in the last years of Horizon 2020. There you find things like the SME instrument, which is now relabeled accelerator grants. You find future and emerging technologies, now relabeled, part of that at least relabeled as Pathfinder grants, and some other activities as well to support innovation. So typically the link to the InvestEU. More information. So there is already a document out there which is about 150 pages long, which is called Orientation Towards the First Strategic Plan for Horizon Europe. And this has been published already in summer. We have received comments from stakeholders, member states, concerned citizens, etc. And some of these have been taken into account, and the version from October is now published on this long URL. But again, just Google Horizon Europe Strategic Plan, and you will find quite easily. You find two sections on space, since we're now talking about space. Space research and innovation, section 4.8, a globally competitive space sector, reinforcing EU sovereignty. And 4.11, new services from space for the EU, society and economy. And the basic division there is that new services from space is basically addressing the research needs of the space program for Galileo, Copernicus, SSA, and GovSatcom, while the globally competitive space sector is focusing on the more enabling technologies, what we discussed earlier today, IOD, IOV, critical technologies for non-dependence, robotics, electric propulsion, etc. Okay, so we are preparing now, excuse me, we are preparing now the work program for the first 2 years. Well, we're not preparing, we are starting to reflect about the preparation of the work program for the next 2 years, based on the strategic plan, the orientation towards strategic plan, and the legal base, which is already published. The Commission proposal has a specific program with some indications. The basic idea is what you see here. We have a number of programs, Galileo, Copernicus, SSA, GovSatcom, with a number of sub-activities, so to say. All of these need to be supported by research in terms of exploiting the systems, the operational systems, and preparing for the future. So developing next generation of satellites and systems for Galileo Copernicus, and the first generation, so to say, for SST, NEO, Space Weather, and GovSatcom. In addition, again, to what is here called space segment technology, so supporting technologies addressing competitiveness of industry, access to space, synergies with other sectors, and implementation modalities. And all these are supported by let's say, consultations with the stakeholder community, which is already ongoing in the context of Galileo Copernicus, in the user groups and user fora already established, and in the context of SSA GovSatcom as well. And for the space segment technology, we have a stakeholder consultation platform that is up and running, which has produced also some short document outlining the main priorities. So this will all feed into the process during next year to develop the draft first work program that will then be discussed with the member states, etc. So the indicative timeline here is, we can jump in 2019-2020 preparations, and of course from 2021, given that we have a decision on the program and the budget, implementation of the first calls and the first actions. So we have a running what is called a program committee, a shadow program committee for the Horizon Europe already meets regularly for the overall program. There were research and innovation days in September. We had, as I mentioned, the public consultation on the strategic plan. We have a new commission in place since a few days in December here, and then we will update the strategic plan and hopefully adopt it in the first quarter of next year. On the 1st of January, we will have a new Director General for Space Industries and Defense, which is in the process of being set up. We will most likely stay in the same building with DG GROW and share some services, but it will be a new DG focusing entirely on space and defense. During the first half of next year, we will be drafting the first work program, and then during the second half of next year, the decision process on the budget and all these things and the final adoption will have to take place in order for the program to properly start on the 1st of January 2021. So we hope that will work out as intended. Right, so that was Horizon Europe and the space program. Finally, a few words, still have 3 minutes, on InvestEU. So we mentioned the ICEP, Innofin Space Equity Pilot, this before coffee. InvestEU is it's a program that intends to bring together all these activities under one roof. the activities that has been running under 2014-2020 that supports entrepreneurship and growth of companies in one way or the other. And you see the whole list of programs here, COSME program, Connecting Europe facility, etc., etc. All that will be brought together under something called InvestEU, including the Juncker Fund, Strategic Fund for Investment, European Fund for Strategic Investment that we have seen. So there will be one single program for this, and very roughly, the overall budget is, it says 40 billion here. I have 38 billion, so I don't know exactly which number is the right one, but sometimes we talk about inflation adjustment numbers and sometimes not, so this adds to the general confusion a little bit. But there are a number of windows: sustainable infrastructure, research, innovation and digitization, SMEs, and social investment and skills. So of course for us, if we think egoistically for space research and innovation, we are interested primarily perhaps about research and SMEs, but of course infrastructure as well. This 40 billion or 38 billion from the EU is mobilizing then private capital on the market, so to say, other risk capital in the order of 700 billion across Europe, both from public funds and private funds. This is the idea, and people tell me it's going to work. Money from the EU budget helps de-risking these investments and therefore attracting private investment capital. I mentioned a little bit this morning about ICEP's similar mechanisms. We will have an advisory hub, portal, and accompanying measures as well to support applicants in this. It's expected to grant financing for the competitiveness of the space sector through sustainable infrastructure in transport, energy, environment, space and digital infrastructure, research and innovation by transfer of research results to the market through these new startup companies and scale-up companies, including through a thematic approach. So space is mentioned here as some thematic areas as well. So where need be, there could be thematic earmarked funding, but usually it's kind of bottom-up. But earmarked thematic approach is possible as well. So I think that concludes what I wanted to say about the upcoming programs. And again, more information is always available on the websites. Next Research and Innovation Framework Program, we talk about here, this is the Horizon Europe, but as well you will find links to InvestEU and the space program on our websites. If you have any other questions popping up afterwards, please feel free to send me an email. I'm always ready to answer questions. If you have some question now on what just was said, we still have a few minutes, I think, to take that. Probably people are more interested in networking and lunching, I think, at this stage, and preparing for the afternoon. So thank you very much for your attention during these 3.5 hours in the morning. I think it was very nice to have you. We had some interesting questions and discussions as well, and I hope it was interesting for you and it gave some additional information and indications and pointers where to find more information. So thank you very much. Thank you.